Between helping customers at my boutique, I received a text, a simple message that would forever alter the course of my life. It was from my husband, Mark. "I'm leaving you and moving to Miami with my 20-year-old girlfriend. I've already emptied our joint account. Good luck." I didn't flinch as I read it. My hands remained steady, my voice calm as I helped Mrs. Peterson pick out a scarf. The only indication that my husband of 12 years had just shattered our marriage with one thoughtless text was a slight tightening around my eyes. I waited until Mrs. Peterson left, her purchase wrapped neatly in our signature silver paper, before typing my response. "Good luck. My name is Claire, and at 38, I received the coldest goodbye in history. But while Mark likely thought I'd crumble, imagining me heartbroken and desperate, I was already locking up my boutique for the day. The signs had been there for months. Late nights at work, which never matched his pay deposits. The sudden password changes on his phone, his obsession with the gym, buying new clothes, trying desperately to recapture his youth. 3 months ago, I found a receipt for dinner for two at an expensive restaurant on a night he'd claimed to be working late. That same night, I opened a separate bank account at a different bank. When he mentioned wanting to combine our accounts, I agreed, playing along while moving my personal savings into the new account. It was all part of my plan. The joint account he had just emptied, it contained just enough to avoid raising suspicions, with 2 months' worth of regular deposits. The rest was safely tucked away, alongside a detailed record of every suspicious transaction he had made over the past year. As my phone buzzed again with another text from Mark, I smiled. "Don't bother begging. Melissa and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later." Melissa, the new receptionist at his office. I'd met her at the company Christmas party, watched her laugh too loudly at Mark's jokes, noticed how she would touch his arm when she thought no one was looking. She was young enough to be his daughter, naive enough to think she was special. I didn't respond to his text. Instead, I called my lawyer, the one I had consulted 2 months ago when I found the hotel charges on our credit card statement. "It's time," I said simply. "He just made his move." "The papers are ready," my lawyer replied. "I'll file them first thing tomorrow. Do you want me to have him served in Miami?" "No rush. Let him think he's won first," I answered. Another text from Mark. "I know this must be hard for you. You're not getting any younger after all. At least you have your little shop to keep you busy." My little shop. The boutique I built from scratch. The one that generated more income than his middle management position. The one I carefully kept separate from our finances. I smiled, thinking of the certified letters that would greet him in Miami. Let him enjoy his moment of triumph. That evening, as I organized the paperwork my lawyer would need, I found our wedding album. Mark looked so different then, before his midlife crisis turned him into a caricature of his former self. These days, he wore shirts too tight for his softening middle and used slang that sounded ridiculous coming from a man of 45. My phone buzzed again. I saw the text and laughed aloud. "Don't worry about the house. I'll let you stay there until you find something smaller." Did he really think he had any claim to my grandmother's house? The house I inherited and kept in my name, despite Mark's repeated suggestions to add him to the deed. That lucky instinct had paid off. Another buzz. "I know the shop means a lot. A business I built, funded, and grew myself, while he complained about my long hours and called it my hobby." I poured myself a glass of wine, the good stuff I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. Tomorrow, Mark would learn the hard truths about property law and separate assets. But tonight? Tonight, I'd enjoy the quiet and plan my next chapter. The next morning, a flurry of angry texts from Mark arrived, each more frantic than the last. I silenced my phone and went to my boutique. Friday was always our busiest day, and I had a new shipment of designer handbags to unpack. Life goes on, even when your husband runs off with a receptionist young enough to be his daughter. Around noon, his mother called. "Claire, dear, Mark told us everything about how controlling you've been, how you drove him away. He says you're being vindictive now, causing problems with his travel plans." I put her on speaker while arranging a window display. "Did he mention emptying our joint account and charging tickets for him and his girlfriend on our credit cards?" Silence. "Then, well, he said you left him no choice, that you'd been cold and distant." "Barbara, I have his texts. Would you like me to read them to you? The one where he bragged about taking our money? Or maybe the one where he mocked my age?" Another pause. He did seem a bit cruel. "I appreciate the call. Barbara, I've always liked you, but I think it's best if we end this conversation now. My lawyer has advised minimal contact with Mark's family during the proceedings. Goodbye, Barbara." Later that afternoon, Mark's sister Amanda began spreading gossip through mutual friends. Mark and Melissa were stuck at a budget motel near the airport, their Miami dreams temporarily derailed. He tried using his personal credit cards, but they had been maxed out for months. Another red flag I had noticed. By the end of the day, my lawyer called with an update. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Monday. Given his admission of emptying the joint account and the documented credit card fraud, we're in a strong position to freeze all remaining assets. Mark continued texting me, each message filled with manipulation and threats. "You've ruined everything. You'll regret being so vindictive." I forwarded each message to my lawyer without responding. Let him dig his hole deeper. The emergency hearing was everything I had hoped for. Mark showed up in a new, tight-fitting designer wardrobe, trying to look younger than his age. Melissa waited outside, her youth painfully obvious under the harsh courthouse lighting. My lawyer presented our evidence methodically. Mark's gleeful text about emptying our account, the credit card fraud, and his history of hidden expenses. The judge asked Mark directly, "Mr. Harrison, do you deny using the joint account to fund a trip with your girlfriend?" Mark shifted uncomfortably. "I was just trying to make a clean break." By committing financial fraud? The judge raised an eyebrow. The final divorce settlement reflected everything I had worked so hard to protect: my house, my business, and my separate assets. Mark received only his personal possessions and his car, which was worth less than he owed on it. As we left the courthouse, Mark hissed, "You've destroyed me." "No, Mark, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure you couldn't destroy me too." Weeks later, I received a call from Mark's mother. She was apologizing, saying, "You've taught our family an important lesson about enabling bad behavior, about making excuses for cruelty." Mark's still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems, but we're not defending him anymore. That's when I realized Mark had tried to diminish me, to discard me, but instead, he had inadvertently pushed me to become stronger, more successful. My boutique chain had grown. I had expanded to a second location, hired 3 new employees, and launched an online store. The irony wasn't lost on me. As Mark struggled to rebuild his life, the little shop he had dismissed was thriving. Success is the best revenge. The rise beyond betrayal. Months passed after the divorce, and life moved forward in ways I hadn't imagined when Mark's betrayal first came to light. My boutique continued to thrive, and I expanded to a second location, bringing my vision to life in ways that had felt impossible before. Every new piece of success was a testament to my strength, to the careful planning I had made in the wake of Mark's cruelty. Each step was a victory, not just over him, but over the expectations that had been set for me as a woman, an older woman in a world that often undervalued her experience. Despite Mark's best efforts to make it seem like he had won by running off with a younger woman, the reality was much different. Melissa, the young receptionist who had once seemed so sure of herself, started to show cracks in her newfound dream life. I heard from mutual friends that she had begun questioning everything. She had left him for someone closer to her age after realizing that his supposed charm couldn't pay the bills. He had tried to woo her with the same promises he had made to me, promises of a future built on empty dreams and plans that always seemed just out of reach. Meanwhile, Mark's career had suffered. His company's HR department had launched an investigation into his relationship with Melissa after someone found out about their affair. The promotion he had been counting on went to someone else, someone who had actually worked hard for it, unlike Mark, who had been too focused on trying to relive his youth. It was a beautiful irony. Mark had left me, thinking I'd fall apart without him, but it was him who couldn't escape the consequences of his own actions. I had worked hard to maintain my independence, to keep my finances separate from his, and it paid off. Not only did I preserve everything I had built, but I also grew it. Even his family began to see the truth, although it came too late. His mother called me several times, each conversation more apologetic than the last. "We had no idea Mark was capable of all this," she said. "He always played the victim, and we just believed him. But now I see. You were right to protect yourself." Their apologies didn't move me. They didn't change the fact that, at the end of the day, Mark's actions had caused irreversible damage. But I couldn't ignore the fact that I had, in some way, become an example of strength and resilience, even to them. They saw me as a woman who had built something solid, something real, while their son had squandered his chances at happiness by trying to run from responsibility. The boutique thrived. It wasn't just a business anymore. It had become a symbol of my survival, my independence, and my refusal to let someone else dictate my worth. I had gone from being the wife who was abandoned via text to the woman running a thriving business. Then came the invitations to speak at women's business conferences. They weren't asking me about my failed marriage. They wanted to hear about my success, about how I had built something out of nothing and kept it growing even when the odds were stacked against me. I started giving advice about how to separate business and personal finances, about trusting your instincts, and about knowing when to walk away from something or someone that wasn't serving you. I framed Mark's final text to me in my office, a reminder of how far I had come. Beneath it, I put a sign that read, "Success is the best revenge." A year later, a year after the divorce, my boutique had expanded to 5 locations. The irony wasn't lost on me. Mark had thought he was destroying me, but instead, he had unknowingly set my true success in motion. He had underestimated me in the worst way, but in doing so, he gave me the strength to rise above his betrayal. During a special event for my 3rd boutique location, which was now a thriving hub of local fashion and a destination for women seeking empowerment through their choices, Mark's mother showed up. I hadn't invited her. She approached me hesitantly, smoothing the dress she had bought from my store, one of the many symbols of my success. "I saw Mark yesterday," she said, a hint of regret in her voice. "He was talking about his glory days, about the life he could have had. He still doesn't get it. He didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it all away." I looked at her, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel any anger or bitterness toward her or Mark. What had happened to him was his own doing. He thought I'd crumble, I said softly, but he never realized that sometimes the best revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. Mark had spent the past year trying to find ways to undo his mistakes. He filed multiple petitions to revisit the divorce settlement, each one dismissed due to the overwhelming evidence of his misconduct. But the more he tried, the more desperate he became. His attempts to shift blame, to claim he had a right to my business, only made things worse for him. His dating profile still claimed he was young at heart, even though his profile picture was clearly outdated. Meanwhile, Melissa, who had left him after realizing the truth, had become a regular customer at my boutique. I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride when I saw her. She was building a life of her own, learning the same lessons I had. Side note, 5 years later, 5 years after the divorce, my boutique chain was stronger than ever. We had reached national attention with features in major business magazines highlighting my journey from betrayal to triumph. As I stood in a flagship store of my business empire, a place that had started as a tiny boutique, I knew that Mark's cruelty had only pushed me to become someone I had never imagined I could be. Then I received a call from Mark's mother one final time. "You taught our family an important lesson, Claire," she said, her voice filled with regret. "About enabling bad behavior, about making excuses for cruelty. Mark's still living at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems, but we're not defending him anymore. You showed us the difference between supporting someone and enabling them." I smiled, hearing those words. They weren't just a confirmation of my strength. They were a reminder that sometimes the people who hurt you the most can inadvertently teach you the greatest lessons about yourself. Mark had thrown away his chance to have everything. He had underestimated the strength of the woman he left behind. And now, 5 years later, as I stood on the cusp of expanding my boutique empire even further, I knew one thing for certain. The best revenge wasn't about getting even. It was about getting better. It was about building something lasting, something real. And that was a lesson Mark would never understand. The final chapter, a legacy of strength. 6 months after the grand opening of my 4th boutique, I stood before a crowd of business owners and aspiring entrepreneurs at a women's business conference. The spotlight wasn't on my past or the heartbreak I'd endured. It was on the future I had built from the ground up, a future that had taken shape not because of betrayal, but in spite of it. Mark's story, once a devastating chapter in my life, had become a footnote in the story of my triumph. The name Harrison was no longer associated with a failed marriage or a broken heart. It was linked to resilience, strength, and success. I had learned to take the pain of betrayal and turn it into something positive, something that would not only provide for me, but also inspire other women to take control of their own futures. As I stood on the stage, I looked out at the audience, a sea of eager faces, all ready to hear my story. My journey had become a beacon of hope, not just for women going through divorce or betrayal, but for anyone who had ever been underestimated. My story wasn't just about surviving, it was about thriving against the odds. After the speech, I was approached by a young woman who looked familiar. As she reached me, she smiled softly. "You probably don't remember me, but I came to your boutique about a year ago, after I found out my husband had been cheating on me. Your story, it gave me the courage to walk away from a life I thought I was trapped in. I opened my own business a few months ago, and I just wanted to thank you for showing me that I could do it too." Tears pricked at my eyes as I looked at her. She was no different from how I had been years ago, lost, unsure, but with the potential to rise. Now, she had found her own strength. I realized in that moment that my own healing had done more than help me. It had inspired others, giving them permission to take control of their lives, their careers, and their futures. I thought of Mark in that moment, not with anger or bitterness, but with something else: gratitude. Without him, I might never have had the courage to push myself as far as I had. Without his betrayal, I might not have learned the power of standing on my own. His actions, cruel as they were, had been the catalyst for my transformation. I had become someone unrecognizable to him, a woman who could not only survive, but thrive. The bitter sweetness of time. The years passed quickly, as they often do when you're fully immersed in building something you love. My boutique empire had expanded to 6 locations. Each new store was not just another business venture. It was a reminder of how far I had come, how much I had achieved. I had expanded into luxury accessories and had plans for even more locations in the future. Mark, on the other hand, was still struggling. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had moved into a small apartment, living in the same area where he had once bragged about escaping to Miami. The money he had once splurged on his youthful lifestyle had dried up. He had to sell his car and take a job that was a far cry from the middle management position he once held. His attempts to date younger women had failed. The women in his age group no longer saw him as a charming, fun-loving man. They saw a man running from responsibility. And Melissa, well, she had moved on. She had found someone her own age, someone who didn't think of their relationship as an escape from the realities of life. I heard that she was building a solid future, one that didn't rely on lies or empty promises. Ironically, she had started a small business of her own, one she was running with the same determination that I had shown. As for Mark's family, they had distanced themselves from him. His sister Amanda, who had once called me cold and controlling, now saw through his facade. She even visited me at my boutique, and we had a heartfelt conversation. "You were right, Claire," she admitted. "Mark played the victim for so long, but after seeing how he's treated everyone around him, I finally understand. He never took responsibility for his actions." I had long since stopped feeling anger or resentment toward his family. They had their own lessons to learn, and they had learned them. I had already moved on, focusing on my own life, my own goals, and my own happiness. The unseen victory. At the 5-year anniversary of my original boutique, I stood in front of a crowd of customers and employees. The space had been transformed from a humble boutique into a flagship store that stood as the heart of my growing empire. I looked out at the smiling faces of my team, the loyal customers who had supported me through thick and thin, and the new entrepreneurs who had come to hear my story. Mark's mother came to the event. I hadn't invited her, but I didn't mind. She approached me after the crowd had thinned out. "I saw Mark yesterday," she said. "He's still stuck in the past, talking about the life he could have had, the life he should have had. But he's wrong. He didn't lose it. He threw it away." I nodded, understanding that she was finally seeing the truth. Mark had made his choices, and now he had to live with them. I had made my choices too, and they had led me to a place of peace and success. I thought about how far I had come in these past 5 years, how I had taken the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the confusion and used them to fuel my drive. My business had grown beyond what I could have ever imagined, and my life was richer for it. I was no longer the woman who had been left behind in the wake of betrayal. I was the woman who had risen from the ashes, stronger than before. I smiled to myself as I thought of that one final text from Mark, the one that had set everything into motion. "Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." That text had been the catalyst for everything. It had been his parting shot, meant to belittle me, but instead, it had ignited a fire that drove me to succeed. Success is the best revenge, and I had succeeded, not just for myself, but for every woman who had ever been told she couldn't, shouldn't, or wouldn't make it. My story had evolved from one of survival to one of inspiration, and every day I continued to prove that sometimes the best way to show your worth is by thriving in ways they never thought possible. Epilogue: The power of preparation. 1 year after the final divorce settlement, I received an invitation to speak at a prestigious women's conference on entrepreneurship. The topic was no longer about divorce or betrayal. It was about building and protecting a successful business. It was the final confirmation that I had truly turned the page. My story had gone from one of heartbreak to one of power, and I was sharing it with the world. And as I stood in front of a room full of women who were hungry for success, hungry for inspiration, I knew that Mark's betrayal had, in the end, given me the best gift I could have ever received: the power to change my life. The legacy of a new beginning. As I spoke at the conference, sharing my journey from betrayal to empowerment, I realized something profound. The woman I had become was not defined by the man who tried to break me, but by the choices I had made to heal, grow, and thrive. What began as a painful chapter in my life had transformed into a platform for success and inspiration. I had built something from the ground up, a business that had given me financial independence, a sense of purpose, and the confidence to take on any challenge. But perhaps the most rewarding aspect was the impact I had on others, particularly women who had experienced similar struggles, whether it was betrayal, heartache, or simply feeling overlooked. I was able to show them that strength doesn't come from avoiding pain, but from facing it head-on and using it to fuel your success. In the years that followed, my story became a beacon of hope. Other women reached out to me, sharing how my journey had inspired them to pursue their own dreams. They had faced difficult relationships, toxic marriages, and career setbacks, but after hearing my story, they found the courage to change their lives. They saw that it was possible to rebuild, not just their careers, but their sense of self-worth. I continued to grow my business, launching new initiatives that focused on empowering women entrepreneurs. Through mentorship programs, I provided guidance to those looking to build businesses of their own. It was fulfilling to see how many women were eager to take control of their futures and break free from the limitations they had imposed on themselves. But it wasn't just about business. It was about community. My boutiques became a place where women could come together, share their stories, and support each other. The sense of solidarity in those spaces was unlike anything I had ever imagined. Women walked in not just to shop, but to find strength in each other. They exchanged stories, gave advice, and lifted one another up in ways that reminded me of the power of a supportive network. Mark, on the other hand, continued to struggle. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had tried to start a business of his own, but it had quickly failed. He had trouble maintaining relationships, and despite his best efforts, he couldn't shake the reputation he had built for himself. His arrogance, the way he thought he could have everything handed to him without putting in the work, had caught up with him. I heard that he was still living with his parents, unable to move forward. It struck me how differently our lives had turned out. While he had tried to escape his responsibilities and take everything I had worked for, I had built something greater, something that would last. The healing power of time. Time, as it often does, had a way of healing wounds. The anger I once felt for Mark had softened into something else. I no longer felt bitterness when I thought of him. Instead, I felt grateful for the lessons, for the strength, and for the journey that had led me to where I was now. There were moments when I remembered the pain of that text, the coldness, the finality of it. but they no longer had the power to hurt me. The life I had built was a testament to everything I was capable of. The boutique, the success, the women I had inspired, they were all proof that I had been right to trust myself, to believe in my ability to overcome. I had become a leader, not by default, but by choice. I chose to take control of my destiny, to stop letting my circumstances define me. In doing so, I created a life that was more fulfilling, more powerful, and more meaningful than anything I had ever imagined. Full circle, the real victory. A decade had passed since the day Mark sent me that fateful text. My boutique chain had expanded even further, and I had received numerous awards for both business excellence and social impact. But the greatest accomplishment was the knowledge that I had stayed true to myself and had built a legacy that would continue far beyond my own success. One evening, as I sat in my office at the flagship boutique, I reflected on how far I had come. My phone buzzed with a notification, another order from my online store, and another message of encouragement from one of the women I had mentored. As I smiled, I thought of Mark again, not with malice. He had been a catalyst, yes, but my journey was always mine to navigate. The greatest revenge wasn't just about financial success. It was about reclaiming my power, my peace, and my future. It was about standing tall and walking with confidence, knowing that I had never needed his validation to succeed. I had built this life with my own hands, my own heart, and my own vision. The ultimate victory was not in spite of Mark, but because of everything I had learned in the aftermath of his betrayal. As I prepared for the opening of my next boutique location, I knew this was just the beginning. The story wasn't over yet. There was still so much to accomplish, so much to give. I had come so far, and I was ready for whatever came next. And with each new milestone, I knew I was not just building a business empire. I was building a legacy that would inspire generations of women to come. Closing thoughts. The strength to move on. It's easy to look back at moments of betrayal and feel consumed by the pain. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that the real power lies not in the past, but in how we choose to move forward. We cannot control the actions of others, but we can always control how we respond. In the end, Mark's text, the way he thought he could diminish me with a few cruel words, had been the greatest gift. It had forced me to look within and find a strength I didn't know I had. And that strength, the one that had carried me through the darkest times, was what led me to everything I have today. I've learned that sometimes the best revenge is not in proving others wrong, but in proving to ourselves just how much we're capable of. And that, I believe, is the most empowering lesson of all. The power of resilience. Years passed, and I watched my business grow into something far beyond what I ever dreamed. The boutiques became more than just stores. They became community hubs where women could find not only beautiful clothes, but also a sense of belonging and empowerment. The success of my business wasn't just about the numbers. It was about creating a space where women could come together and feel supported. As my brand continued to expand, I found myself becoming a mentor to other young entrepreneurs, particularly women who were starting businesses of their own. I'd always believed in the importance of supporting one another, especially as women navigating spaces that had traditionally been dominated by men. I didn't just want to build a successful business. I wanted to help others build their dreams too. With each passing day, I met more women who had faced struggles of their own, betrayal, heartbreak, and the crushing weight of societal expectations. And with each story shared, I realized that my journey, my resilience, had become a guiding light for others. In some small way, I was paying forward the strength that had once been shown to me, the belief that anything was possible if we had the courage to pursue it. It became clear that my business had not only changed my life, but had touched the lives of so many others. I was no longer just a survivor of betrayal. I was a symbol of what could be achieved when you refuse to let your circumstances define you. The power of forgiveness, a full circle moment. One day, several years after the divorce, I received an unexpected message from Mark. His name appeared on my phone screen, and for a moment, I hesitated. After everything that had happened, I was not sure what this message might bring. Resentment, guilt, or even a belated apology. I opened it. "Claire, I don't expect you to respond, but I wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything. I took you for granted, and I've learned the hard way that sometimes the greatest mistake is letting go of someone who truly cares about you. I can't undo what I've done, but I hope you found peace." I stared at the message for a long time. It was a strange feeling. There had been so much anger, so much betrayal, that I never expected to hear anything like this from him. But as I thought about it, I realized that forgiveness was no longer about him. It was about me. I had spent so many years angry, frustrated, and hurt. And I realized that holding on to that resentment wasn't serving me anymore. It was a heavy burden I had been carrying, and it was time to set it down. So, I did the one thing that surprised even me. I forgave him, not for his sake, but for mine. I forgave him so I could finally release the past and continue building the future I deserved. In that moment, I realized just how far I had come. I didn't respond to his message. I didn't need to. My life was no longer defined by him or by the pain he caused. Instead, I focused on the legacy I had built, the thriving businesses, the women I had helped, and the empowerment I had spread. The new chapter, a legacy of empowerment. 5 years after my third boutique opened, my brand had expanded beyond anything I could have imagined. I had become a recognized name in the fashion industry, not just for my designs, but for the message I conveyed, that every woman deserves to feel confident, strong, and capable of achieving her dreams. And yet, as I stood in the quiet of my office, looking at the photos on the walls of my boutiques, I realized that the greatest success wasn't in the accolades or the growth of my empire. The greatest success was in the lives I had touched, the women I had mentored, and the community I had built. I had gone from being the woman who was betrayed and left behind to the woman who built an empire not just of clothing, but of opportunity, strength, and empowerment. And as I looked at the women who had walked through my boutique doors, I realized that they were not just customers, they were sisters in arms. Together, we had created something extraordinary. I remembered the early days when I had just opened my first boutique. It had been a small, uncertain step into the unknown. And now here I was, the owner of multiple successful locations, leading a brand that was known across the country and even internationally. But none of this would have been possible without the first crucial step, the step I took alone, without Mark, without anyone else. It was the hardest, but also the most important decision I ever made. A full circle moment. One final moment of reflection came when I received a letter in the mail, a letter from the local Women's Business Association. I had been nominated for an award recognizing women who had made a significant impact in business. The letter was accompanied by a note that read, "Your story has inspired so many of us. Your resilience and determination in the face of adversity have created a ripple effect that has reached women across the globe. You are a true leader and role model." I felt a lump rise in my throat as I read those words. It was a reminder of just how far I had come. The life I had built, the businesses I had grown, the community I had fostered, it all stemmed from the quiet strength I had found in myself. I walked into my boutique the next day, the weight of the letter in my hand, and looked around at my team, my customers, the women who had walked through these doors over the years. I realized that this was it. This was my legacy, not just the business I had built, but the women I have helped empower along the way. As I stood there, I thought of Mark once more, not with anger, but with clarity. His departure, his betrayal, had been the catalyst for everything that followed. In some strange way, he had unknowingly pushed me toward my greatness. I had taken the pain he caused me, the heartbreak, and I had turned it into something beautiful. I had built a life, not defined by the mistakes of others, but by my own strength, my own decisions. And in that moment, I knew that I had finally and completely moved on. The power of moving on. As time passed, the scars of my past began to fade. The pain that had once felt like a heavy weight on my shoulders became nothing more than a distant memory, a reminder of how far I had come. I had learned to let go of the past, not in the sense of forgetting it, but in a way that allowed me to stop letting it control my future. My life was now full of purpose. Each new day brought with it new opportunities, new challenges, and new victories. I continued to expand my business, but it was no longer just about the success of my boutiques. It was about the impact I had on the women around me, the lives I was helping to change, and the legacy I was building. My business had become a symbol of resilience. It stood as a testament to the power of rebuilding from the ashes, of turning heartbreak into something greater. I had become more than just a survivor of betrayal. I had become a leader, a mentor, and a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever felt broken or. And as I watched my businesses flourish, I realized that my true success wasn't measured by profits or awards. It was measured by the people I had helped, the women I had empowered, and the lives I had touched. A life reclaimed. It wasn't just my business that had grown. So had I. I had found joy in the things I had once taken for granted, the quiet moments, the laughter with friends, the sense of peace that came with knowing I had built a life I could be proud of. The relationship I had with myself was stronger than ever. I had learned the importance of self-love, self-respect, and the power of setting boundaries. I had also learned the value of true friendship. In the years following the divorce, I had surrounded myself with people who supported me, who uplifted me, and who believed in me. These friendships had become the bedrock of my emotional well-being. They were the ones who had been there through the tough times, the ones who had celebrated my successes and stood by my side when I needed it most. I no longer felt the need to prove myself to anyone, least of all to Mark. In the past, I had been consumed with trying to show him I was capable of succeeding without him. But now, I realized that the only person I needed to prove anything to was myself, and I had done that in spades. The final victory, a full circle moment. Years after my journey began, as I sat in my office, overlooking the busy streets of the city, I thought about the long road that had brought me here. My businesses had grown, my personal life had flourished, and I had become a woman who no longer feared the unknown. The lessons I had learned about resilience, about self-worth, about the power of community, had shaped me into someone I was proud to be. I had recently received an invitation to speak at a major women's conference on entrepreneurship. It was a huge honor, and one that felt like the culmination of everything I had worked for. As I prepared for my speech, I thought back to the early days when I was just starting out, unsure of myself, unsure of my future. But now, as I stood at the threshold of even greater opportunities, I felt a profound sense of peace. I had built this life with my own hands, and it had become something far more beautiful than I had ever imagined. The day of the conference arrived, and I took the stage with a sense of confidence and purpose that I had never known before. As I looked out into the crowd of women from all walks of life, each with their own stories, struggles, and dreams, I knew that this was where I belonged. This was the purpose I had been seeking all along, not just to build a successful business, but to help others build their own futures. As I shared my story with the audience, I saw the faces of women light up with understanding, with recognition, with hope. I realized that this was the true measure of success, the ability to inspire others, to help them believe in their own potential. After the speech, several women came up to me, thanking me for my story, for showing them what was possible. Their words filled me with a sense of fulfillment I had never expected. I wasn't just a businesswoman. I was a role model, a mentor, someone who had paved the way for others to follow. A future built on strength. Looking back, I realized that my journey had come full circle. The pain I had experienced had given me the strength to rise above it, to build something that would last, a business, a community, a legacy. I had turned betrayal into triumph, heartbreak into strength, and uncertainty into an unwavering belief in myself. My future was no longer defined by the man who had betrayed me, nor by the mistakes of my past. It was defined by the woman I had become, the woman who had learned to trust herself, to take risks, and to create something beautiful out of the broken pieces of her life. And as I stood in front of that crowd, ready to inspire the next generation of women entrepreneurs, I knew that I had finally found the peace I had been seeking all along. The peace that comes with knowing that no matter what life throws at you, you have the power to rise above it. In the end, it wasn't the revenge or the payback that mattered. It was the strength, the resilience, and the courage to move forward and create a life that was all my own. That was the greatest victory of all. The end of one chapter, the beginning of another. The years that followed continued to be filled with growth and expansion, both in my business and in my personal life. I took on new projects, explored new opportunities, and nurtured the friendships and relationships that had become the foundation of my support system. One day, as I looked out over the city from my office window, I realized that the journey wasn't just about reaching the destination. It was about the lessons learned along the way. The moments of doubt, the setbacks, and the triumphs, they had all shaped me into the woman I was today. I had gone from a woman who had been left broken to a woman who had built an empire. From someone who thought she had nothing to someone who had everything she needed within herself. And as I closed my office door, I smiled, knowing that my story wasn't over. It had only just begun.